Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome back to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, our new producers, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, I meet people who tell me they only listen to the podcast when they're exercising. I guess it is Mazares give people a little excitement. I've met quite a few people who tell me they only call up. Torah Anytime has an option for calling up, and they said that we don't have the internet, chas v'shalom, but we call up and we hear it on the phone. And we'll see that we're on a number of other platforms. Yeah? So that's our sponsorship for this week. In honor of my sister's engagement to Shmuli. Mazel tov. I don't know who you are or your sister is, but I do know Shmuli. Love, your sister who listens to Rabbi Orlofsky on the 24/6 app. So there you go. We're another location where we are. And I haven't done this in a while. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Apparently, on some platforms, that helps the algorithm. I don't really know what an algorithm is. I'll tell you the truth. I know we did this in high school, algorithms, but I don't know what they are. Apparently, there's something that Google uses and certain other platforms use to be able to control who sees what. I don't think Torah Anytime has an algorithm. I'm not really sure. But anyway, we want people to be able to hear about it. And like I mentioned, we started doing, little shorts, even just to advertise the podcast, because why shouldn't more people enjoy it? That's the idea. If we're doing it anyway, I'm sitting here anyway, I'm talking to you anyway, we have these exceptional programs. That's the only thing I can say, in my opinion. I said to somebody, I think there are so many loyal fans here because nobody does what we do. Nobody. You can get a straight Torah podcast. You can get nebuch, things that are just like tzanis. But to be able to present things in a Torah-dika fashion that hopefully will be entertaining is very meaningful. And in fact, I got a comment that was forwarded to me by my producer. I look forward all week for the new podcast to come out. Thank you so much for giving us all chizuk. I appreciate your frankness about the various topics. Yeah. I had somebody who said to me once, he goes, every now and then when you're speaking, I see you sort of like stop and try to decide whether this is appropriate. And regardless, you say it anyway. So I don't even know why you even go through that process, yeah? I definitely qualify as a Rabbi Orlofsky crazy. I find myself quoting Rabbi Orlofsky quite often. It is scary. It's a scary thing. I was just telling this to my wife the other day. I have met in the recent weeks a dozen people who know everything I have ever said. They can quote it back to me verbatim. I start a line and they finish it for me, yeah? Hashem should bench you with many more healthy years of being mechazeh Klal Yisrael. For Hasidic Shavart, when you get flack, it shows you're doing something great because the Satan is trying to get in the way. So thank you so much for that beautiful, beautiful comment. And I guess maybe just a little housekeeping before we start. I have started a new policy, and I'll explain to you the policy. Yeah. As you know, I have never been a fan of from media. I find that whatever standard they are using to make decisions as to what is mutter and usr to say makes no sense to me. When I see from publications putting out an article attacking a Torah personality, it's just evil. Yeah. When they don't do it, they allow people in the letter to the editor column to attack Gedolei Torah and other people, just average folks. I told you that I was sort of writing for a publication, and someone wrote in a letter and attacked me. They didn't understand what I said, bichlal, and no one told me about it or gave me a chance to respond, and it was just out there. This ridiculous attack on me that made absolutely no sense, but not everybody's medayik into it. They just see, oh yeah, Rabbi Orlofsky, blah, 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 you know what I mean? So I think that is horrendous. There is no reason for it. There's no reason for it. And there are a few what are called from news sites online. And not all of them present material that is appropriate. My daughter told me that there's some Hasidic fellow here in Eretz Yisrael who goes through all the news and encapsulates it, and you can call up and it gives you a 5-minute that he sums up for you in Yiddish, I think, in Yiddish or Hebrew, I'm not sure, all of the news that you need to know, and that's it. So you're holding it. But some of these places, online, and even the places that are more careful, and I'll mention one by name, Yeshiva World News, which has a reputation of presenting things in a more careful way, they don't edit the comments. And people make these horrific comments that are mamish isurei d'oraisa. Isurei d'oraisa. And someone I know said that he went to them and said, why do you do this? And he said, that's why people read the website. They go there for the terrible comments. But do you understand the Isuri d'Oraisa that you're being the Pharisee by letting people make these yichi comments? Anyway, some of the platforms that I'm on allow you to make comments. And I've never really edited out the comments. Sometimes when I have a pro-Hamas person doing an anti-Jewish thing, I will delete it. But for the most part, I haven't really deleted them. But there are a few people, and I can tell it's just one or two, because most of the people who watch and listen to me have this as a basic moral parameter. They understand, they have basic morality. You don't say disgusting things to people. They understand that. But there's one or two people who have taken it upon themselves to make yichi comments about other people. Sometimes they attack Rabbanim. Isuri d'oraisa mamish. Yeah? Terrible, 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 terrible. Yeah? Read what the Rambam says about that. Yeah? But otherwise, you have again, one or two people, as far as I can tell, who make nasty comments about other people who have made comments. Insulting the people who have made comments. So I finally had enough, and I started deleting those comments, and I will not allow it. So if you're commenting because you want to say nasty things about people, go to another website. Go to Yeshiva World News. They don't care. You can say any yichi thing you want over there, and they won't edit it out. Go write a letter to these places that will publish whatever you say, no matter how disgusting it is. But stay off of my websites. Stay off of my platforms. Because we have good people who are Yirei Shemayim and who want to have respect for other Jews. And if you're not one of them, do me a favor. Go someplace else. I don't need your business. I don't get paid for this anyway. That's it. I need your business, It's all right. I'll have one last view. But stay off if you're going to make your yichi comments to other people. Yeah, okay, you want to criticize me? I don't mind people who criticize me. Yeah, even when they do it in a disgusting fashion, like one person does. But you're going to pick on other people or other rabbanim or other people who are commenting? Not on my watch. That ends. That ends now. So, like I say, that's just a little public service announcement. And it used to get me crazy because, they say in education that 90% of the time are spent on 10% of the kids. And I've found this in especially when it comes to speaking into education, things like this. Somebody will say to me, people people complained that you X, that you, whatever it is. And I said, what people? You know, people have commented. How many comments? One. So one person makes a comment, and what is this? The woke movement? One person criticizes something and they all go crazy? That is why, not that I'm a beer drinker, when I turned 40, I forced myself to be able to drink whiskey. It's not easy. I never drank whiskey. To me, it tastes like the old Listerine. You know, it's good for like an antiseptic, you know. I don't like the taste. I read the bottle, it says, oh, it has hints of vanilla and cinnamon. Yeah, you got to drink a lot of that stuff before you're tasting cinnamon, trust me. He's like, oh, cinnamon, you know, forget about it. It's not there, you know. As opposed to my go-to wine, which is Baron Herzog White Zinfandel. And when you have that chilled, it says on the bottle, has tastes of strawberry and cotton candy. I can taste those in that wine, trust me. Scotch, I don't taste anything, you know. I push myself, but I can't get myself to drink beer. Because to me, beer tastes like mold. I don't know. There's a difference between something that has fermented and something that mamish tastes like it's still mold. That's what beer tastes like to me. But, okay, listen, I didn't grow up drinking, you know. I have many bad habits. Drinking and smoking were about the only two that I didn't pick up. I can't say doing drugs because every morning I take a big package of medications, so I guess I do drugs, not recreationally. but those things, I remember when I had my heart attack, you know, they said the only thing you have going for you is that you didn't smoke, you know. I eat unhealthy. I don't exercise like I should. You know, I have I had a terrible temper. You know, all kinds of different things that I promised. But the only thing I didn't do, I didn't smoke and I didn't drink. Yeah. So so that's so beer doesn't appeal to me. But there is a beer called Bud Light, which was the most popular light beer, and somebody. The term they use, of course, is woke, decided to expand the base and turn against everybody who normally buys their beer. And put in some trans guy to advertise their beer, and the entire company collapsed, you know. So now, and I'm not endorsing it, and I'm sure this story will never appear on that Hasidic guy who gives his news update, but, you know, there was an ad that came out recently for jeans. It's not anything that we should know about or be familiar with. But there were people who were outraged about this ad, and they started pressuring, and the company stood up and said, you know what, go away. I don't care what you think. And their stock shot up because a couple of online bullies, it should not be what determines how you make decisions in life. And that's why I'm always amazed when someone says, listen, we've had complaints, don't say this. What complaints? You know, people have commented. What? One person made a comment. Or two people make a comment. That should not be enough to therefore say, oh my goodness, Anashim Avakshim. That's a joke that my kids used to tell, you know. This rabbit goes into a makolet and says, Yesh ugat gezer? Do you have carrot cake? I says, no. So he comes back the next day, Yesh ugat gezer? Yeah. Have carrot cake? He says, look. 4 or 5 days he comes in. So the makolet owner says to his wife, no, Anashim Avakshim? People are asking. So the next day the rabbi comes in, he goes, Yesh ugat gezer? He says, Kain. Nachon shezeh iksa? It's disgusting, right? But the point is, people keep coming in, you know, and asking for it. So you assume that's because there's a demand for it. There's not. And so I have never really cared what anybody thinks per se. I've always marched to the beat of my own drummer, and you know, I've tried to do what I think is emes and what I think is right. And people who want to be, you yichi and disgusting, go someplace else. There are places that will appreciate you. Yeah, they like you. We don't. I don't want anyone with a bad attitude. I only have happy campers. We are going to have fun, or else I'll find you and I'll kill you. That's not my line. It's Jackie Mason at the end of the show. Because I know there are people here who are offended. What are you, offended? An old Jews trying to make a living. You're offended. Trust me, if I find anyone who's offended, you ain't got long to live. I'll track you down and I'll kill you. So, you know, like I say, we're just, I just feel like I had to do that because I was so shocked when I happened to see that somebody would make a disgusting comment to somebody who is part of the Rabbi Orlofsky show community. It was very interesting. I came to Eretz Yisrael, it's now 36 years. Yeah, almost. It's just almost to the date, 36 years that I made Aliyah. I came here originally to learn for 3 years to prepare myself for Rabbanus, and I was going to become a shul rabbi. I felt like I have the skills necessary to make a good shul rabbi. I believe in building communities. I believe in building families, building people. You know, I think I could have done a very good job. As it happens, I had a lot of options here in Eretz Yisrael, so I never went back. But after I lost all of my jobs through my wit and personality, and I really didn't have much to do, so somebody that I know reached out to me. A shul in Eretz Yisrael was looking for a Rav. It was mostly English speakers, and they would, the way he put it, he goes, it would be such a thrill if you would apply for this job. And I ignored it, as I usually do, and my wife said, come on, you know, you have to do some shtadlis, you know, you're not doing anything, you know. So it's the 1 hour a week you sit in front of your bookcase and talk, you know, so you should go for the job. So I drew up the first resume that I ever made in my entire life. I never made a resume. Every job that I had ever had, I was either offered or bullied or tricked into taking, right? I was a chapter advisor in Los Angeles. I was tricked into taking it. They offered me regions around the country. I took Long Island. They told me afterwards they had to cover up the phone so I wouldn't hear them laughing. They had gone through 5 directors in 2 years. There was only 1 kid left in the region. There were no chapters, no office, no nothing. And the fact that I was turning down major regions to take this, they thought was the biggest joke. But okay, I did pretty good. And I came to Eretz Yisrael, and when I taught for Discovery, somebody pressured me into teaching with Discovery. Somebody pressured me to teach in seminary, you know, and basically every place that I went, you know. So when I left Or Sameach, I was waiting for my next position. It never happened. I was just very surprised. So I never had a resume. I never went looking for a job. And I think everybody knows who I am already, but I wrote up my first resume and I sent it in. It was during COVID, so we had a Zoom interview, and everybody looked like they really liked me and were having a good time. And then I got a form letter refusal. Dear candidate, thank you so much for applying. We've decided to go in a different direction. Good luck in your future endeavors. And I wasn't even trying to get the job. They asked me to apply. You know, so someone said to me, they probably wanted to have the chashivas of saying, we turned down Rabbi Orlofsky. Ken Zayin, I don't know. But I never had it. So the closest that I have to a community is this podcast, the people who are here. And when I meet people around the world, I was just in England for the starting Project Inspire there, and I met so many people in England who are big fans, listen, you know, to the podcast. And I said, well, it comes here. He goes, yeah, you know, the internet goes everywhere in the world. I said, oh, amazing, you know. And who knows? Who knows, you know, how many people? And I feel like all of us are united. And that's why, just to give an update, the manager of the hotel that I was looking into making my Pesach program said to me, I can't talk to you until Elul because I'm busy with Ben Azmanim, and then we'll talk. And I hope we ever do it, because just the idea of getting, and I said, I'm only going to advertise on my podcast and my website, and that's it. I don't want any outsiders. I want only our people come together and spend Pesach. And that's why someone said to me, you know, you could probably take a bigger hotel. You only have 150 rooms. I said, that's all I want, so that I can spend time with everybody who comes and to be able to have that cash. That's what I want. I don't want 1,000 people. Anyway, but even if I could fill it up, I wouldn't want that. So but be that as it may, the point is that I think it's a really nice thing. I have a tshuka, and maybe I'll do this for next year, to maybe see if I can take a hotel for Shabbos Nachamu someplace in the mountains. I assume there are still some hotels over there, you know, and make something, assuming that we're out there. I know you're out there. I know I can track about 25,000 of you. There might be more, but that's from my numbers. I can track 25,000 of you, and it's so interesting. You know, when I interviewed Tuvia Singer, I told this already, I'm sure. I mentioned, you know, that we have between 20 and 25,000 people, and I had a lot of nasty comments on that one, but one of them was, yeah, in your dreams, 25,000. I have over 25,000 views just on YouTube alone, besides all my other platforms. But the point is that it would be a nice thing for us to be able to get together in person and not just virtually. But that's my point. My point is that don't insult my people. If you want to watch the podcast, you want to be part of the community, that's great. But don't hurt anybody else. And that's it. I spent too much time on this, but I thought it was important. So what do I want to talk about? You know, it's been a zmanim. And if you're like me, where, you know, you retired early, not by choice, you know, or if you have an actual job or things, you don't have a bein hazmanim. There's no concept of bein hazmanim. There's usually people take vacation in the summer, you know. Guy goes for a checkup. The doctor says to him, you have 2 weeks to live. He says, oh, and then I'll take the last week in July and the first week in August. You know, people take vacation, you know. But a lot of people don't have that calendar of the bein hazmanim. But, you know, since a lot of our audience are part of the Yeshiva Sha'olim, whether you're actually in Yeshiva or not, you have a certain sense of bein hazmanim. Bein hazmanim is a more relaxed time. As you know, we've had some podcasts during bein hazmanim where we talk, you know, about more relaxed ideas. Mirza Hashem, and coming up, I'm going to have my son Yaakov back on to talk about some interesting things. I don't want to say in advance, but to do some different things. So the podcast today, what I want to talk about, is based on a question that I got once. And I don't know if I ever mentioned even this question. But the question was like this. I see you quote a lot from literature. Could you maybe give a Rabbi Orlofsky reading list? I think that's absolutely fascinating. Now, a little background to this. Yeah. Obviously, if you have a choice between learning Torah and reading a novel, you should learn Torah. If you have a choice between learning Torah and reading a non-fiction book, be it about history or science, etc., you should learn Torah. But if you're going to have some downtime anyway, then is reading novels a positive thing to do or not? I heard Rabbi Franz say on a tape more than once, you know, he gives shir during the year, and he says it was bein hazmanim, so I got to, you know, I had the time to be able to read a newspaper. Yeah. The mashmayis is he does not read newspapers during this month. He's busy preparing for his shirim, etc. I guess during bein hazmanim, when he's a little more relaxed, people go swimming, people you know, do other recreational activities. So his recreational activity is reading the paper. Now, when I heard this, it had to be 30, 35 years ago, maybe, when I heard this on a cassette tape. And there was no Hamodia or Yated or any of these kind of things. They were just regular newspapers, you know. And he would read the newspapers to be able to keep up. I heard a story, I don't know if it's true, I'm not Pesach Kron, but I don't check my sources, that they said in Telz, they used to, Telz in Europe, Motzi Shabbos, they would take out all of the newspapers and learn upshot in the news, what was happening in the news, to get a mahalach of how we should be dealing with things. So, so there is such a concept as that. But the idea is, that's when I have some downtime. I read the newspaper. Yeah. When I go to America, I buy a copy of Scientific American and Discover magazine, and I read to keep up with the latest quasi-science. I say quasi-science because they cannot help but inject politics into this, which is very unfortunate. You know, in the Scientific American, in the back, they have a story from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and 150 years ago. You never find any of this, you know, woke nonsense inside of the magazines from many years ago. But okay, so that's in my bathroom. That's my bathroom thing. But what about novels? But when I say novels, I mean literature. Literature. So someone told me, someone that I know who's trustworthy, he says he once asked Rav Moshe Shapiro about literature, and he said, "Ich weiß, if you hold that it's chochmas goyim, then it's mutter." So what does that mean? Chochma b'goyim ta'amin, meaning if you say the non-Jews have made developments in science, in medicine, mathematics, you can believe that. You have to have the ability to differentiate between what is actually science and what is speculative theory. So when science tells you that the world is 15 billion years old, they, of course, cannot prove that. They have different evidence that would suggest a theory. When they tell you that evolution is a fact, that's not true. It's a theory used to explain a number of things, and there's many kashas on it, and the kashas they tend to push to the side and embrace the theory tremendously. But theories are just that, theories. That's not science. But if you can prove it, I remember when Moshe Shapiro came out against certain books that were there to explain how science, basically, you know, Chazal don't know anything about science and only scientists do, and basically attacking Chachamim. So Moshe Shapiro came out very strongly about it, and I wrote, Kotten Shebektanim, wrote a letter supporting Reb Moshe's position. And of course, I found myself in the midst of a firestorm. And one guy says, well, then how does Orlofsky fly in a plane? Because that's experiential. You can see whether or not a plane flies. It's not, I have a theory that I can build a faster than light spacecraft using quantum mechanics that can take me to another galaxy. Shkoyach. When I see it, I'll believe it. You know, right now that falls under the category of science fiction. And even though I was a Trekkie in the 1960s when this show first came out, yeah, we cannot at this point create a transporter. Okay, it's just not there. I cannot beam you down to the planet's surface. It's ridiculous. But, you know, so okay, but it's a theory. Theories are fine, but that's not science. But if the yesh chochma b'goyim ta'amin. So does he say English literature, if you hold it, he didn't say no. He says if you hold it as a chochma, then it's mutter. What does that mean? So when I taught in Discovery, one of the people I had the chus of working with, was Rabbi Ari Khan. And we were discussing giving stories over. And I have a policy that I will never knowingly say a story that's not true. Yeah? Because I like to feel like I have some integrity. And he said to me, Shlomo Zalman says you can. Now, I did not see this psak from Shlomo Zalman. I heard it from Ari Khan, but I consider him to be Ish Ne'aman. He says, the psak that Shlomo Zalman says, you can make up a story and present it as if it's true. His Raya L'Dava is Sefer Eov. Everyone knows Sefer Eov, the book of Job, and all of his sufferings, and everything that happens to him, and the conversations he has with his friends, and God appears to him at the end. And the question was, when did he live? And the Gemara discusses all kinds of different positions. When did Eov live? Did he live during the time of Moshe Rabbeinu? Did he live during the time of Abraham? When did he live? And there's one shita that says he never lived. He's just a mashal. So says Shlomo Zalman, they present an entire book of Tanakh as if it's emes, and it may never have ever happened. It's just a mashal. So he says, you see from this that you can present something as true even though it didn't happen. It reminds me of a line that Rabbi Wein likes to say, all of my stories are true, it's just some of them haven't happened yet. Yeah. Having said that, he himself is a historian, and I don't believe that he really says things unless he has some basis for them. But that's the point that he makes. When he's telling a story, I guess what he's trying to say is, he's not Pesach Corona, and he checks out all of his sources to make sure that he traces it back to see where it comes from. But literature is a mashal. It's there basically to teach us things in a way that we can understand. Now, the whole idea of a mashal is we make it in a way that you can grasp it because you may not understand the essence. That's why the smartest guy who ever lived, Shlomo Melech, wrote a book called Mishlei, Mishalim, because he wanted to explain the greatest depth of Torah, and he presented it as stories so that you could get the story, and within the story figure out what was going on behind the scenes. And that's what a mashal does. Lama hadavar doimer. How many times do you see that in Chazal? What is this like? There was a king, there was this, there was that. There's a mashal, and there's a nimshal. And the mashal helps you understand it. Moshe Shapiro said once, he goes, you find in Midrashim sometimes fantastical things, stories that are just mind-bending, that you just couldn't possibly have happened. And the Rashba says, not every Agadata is meant to be taken literally, and sometimes they're there. Now, which are and which are not, you need a Masorah for. But the Rashba says, the Gemara in Brachos that says that Og picked up a mountain the size of the entire Machne Yisrael and was going to drop it on top of them, and the ants ate it, and it fell on his head, and then his teeth grew, and it broke off. Because that did not literally happen. Yeah. That's what the Rashba says. So, when it comes to Gadatas, why are they written in fantastical things? All of the Rabba Baba Chana Gemaras, So they're written that way because they're trying to communicate ideas that are outside of our frame of reference. So it can't use regular stories. It has to bring a fantastical story to bring something of tremendous depth to us. So if I tell you a story, the story is mamshech libai. Ad kedei kach, that the Chacham say you're not allowed to learn Agadata on Yontif, Sifrei Agadata. Why? Because you'll get so caught up in that, you won't go to the halacha shiurim that are given on Yontif. And we want you to learn halacha, and not just Agadata. So stories pull you in, and you become emotionally attached to the characters that are being introduced. And it allows you to bring across different values. Now you have to be very careful, because sometimes the value they want to bring across is not necessarily good. Now, I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but some years ago, this woman, J.K. Rowling, wrote a series of books based on a little boy who becomes a wizard, Harry Potter. It was somewhat popular. And I was asked to write an article, I think when book 4 came out. And I said, the problem with this is that once people are emotionally invested, and suddenly she wants to bring across values that are not good, what are you going to do? People are already invested. When book 5 came out, there was an article in Time or Newsweek, I don't remember which one it was, where they were trying to examine the phenomena. They say, teachers say when a new Harry Potter book comes out, reading scores rise 2 grades. He says, kids with dyslexia read this book 6, 7 times, over and over again, pushing themselves to get through it. It has a, if you pardon the expression, a magical effect on people and sucks them in. So what do you do if you're in the middle of the series and suddenly she reaches a point where she decides to say, let's say, for example, one of the main characters is gay, and you didn't know that. Or, more important, she slips in values without you even realizing it. So, the Death Eaters, who are the bad guys, yeah, they believe in purebloods. Only pureblood wizards marrying other wizards. And so therefore, if you're not a pureblood, you know, the term mudblood, that's a terrible thing. So they have a number of characters, like Hagrid, who's from an intermarriage of a wizard and a giant. Or they have Lupin, who's a werewolf. You know, or they have, you know, the smartest one, this Hermione, her real name is pronounced Hermione, who, she's a mudblood. She did not come from wizarding family, you know. They're all the good people. And the purebloods, unless they reject this, are bad ones. Which means that a frum Jew is a Death Eater, because we only marry other Jews. We disagree with intermarriage. So that means that we're bad. So this is a subtle message, but one that comes across. Yeah. Now I understand she's going for a sense of universal tolerance, but on a Jewish value, that could be problematic. Okay, that's all by way of introduction. So I'll start with, I think, a very important book. I was teaching in the intro program in Or Sameach. I may have told this story already. I was teaching in the intro program in Or Sameach, and a guy asked me just out of the blue, what do you think is the best book that was ever written? And without hesitating, I said, Watership Down. He said, what? I said, it's about rabbits. Okay, that's a little off-putting. 6 months later, because people in the intro program come and go, sort of like Alice in Wonderland, people come and go so quickly around here. So, somebody else, just out of the blue, says to me, what do you think was the best book ever written? And once again, without hesitating, I said, Watership Down. He says, Watership Down? I said, it's about rabbits. And it turns out that the guy who had asked me the question 6 months ago was back in Israel and was in the class. And he says, you know, I asked you this question 6 months ago, and when I got back to America, I bought a copy, and you're right. It's the best book ever written. Now, I've gone through any number of copies because people borrow my copy and it disappears. So when I was in America the last time, I bought myself another copy of it to chazer it over. And I didn't realize that this is the 50th anniversary of the book coming out. And I ended up with the 50th anniversary copy of Watership Down. And it comes with an introduction of an author I've never heard of, Madeline Miller, who won the Orange Prize for Fiction in 2012. And her books have been translated in more than 32 languages. And she gives an introduction. And I was shocked when I read this introduction, because this is almost word for word what I have been saying for years. And to see somebody else say it. So you'll indulge me if you will. I'll explain to you why I think this book is so important. I first read Watership Down when I was 12 on a family road trip. I had terrible motion sickness and usually didn't read in the car. But once I began the book, I found I couldn't stop. For hundreds of miles, I read on, nauseated, but unwilling to turn away for even a moment from Hazel, Fiver, Bigwig, and the rest. I was still reading when we got out of the car and walked into the hotel lobby. The clerk said, "Looks like a good book. What's it about?" I looked up at her woozy. It was about everything, is what I wanted to say. About trauma and injustice and hope and courage. It's about friendship, leadership, community, what makes a good life. But I didn't have the words for all that, so I said, it's about rabbits. She blinked, huh. I've returned to Watership Down often since then. All it takes is for me to open the book to any page at all, and I'm plunged back into the same deep joy that I felt when I was 12. In the intervening 30 years, my appreciation for Adams' masterpiece has only grown. At every turn, Adams threads a nearly impossible needle, creating a story with both great simplicity and great depth, full of thrilling plot twists, pounding action scenes, and genuine tragedy that somehow centers around the lives of, yes, rabbits. He pulls off the trick of never letting us forget that they are rabbits, who only live for a few years, who speak pragmatically of breeding, who can't count higher than 4, while also creating characters with a very human psychology. From the ground up, he imagines an entire culture, language, and mythology, and the result remains one of the most entertaining and immersive fantasy worlds I've encountered. Adams is well versed in epic and classical literature, and Watership Down draws inspiration from Homer, Shakespeare, Virgil, and others. Its plot springs from the tantalizing question, what if the prophet Cassandra foretold the fall of her home, but instead of ignoring her, a band of brave souls listened and fled in time? For those of you not familiar with your Greek mythology, Cassandra was cursed by Apollo to always tell the truth and never be believed. So she said that her city would be destroyed and no one listened to her. But what if some of them did? The story can be seen as a sort of Lapine retelling of the Aeneid. Refugees from a foreign city search for a new home, mixed with a few other famous mythological episodes, including the kidnapping of the Sabine women and the land of the lotus eaters. I don't know what that is. But you don't need to know any of this to enjoy the book. Adams' intent isn't classical name-dropping, but rather classical innovation. Mythology is by definition larger than life, stuffed with gods and monsters and magic. Adam keeps the stakes from the great epics, war, loss, death, powerful threads of community and personal courage. But instead of imagining them on a grand stage, he sets them with utter seriousness in the English countryside among ordinary rabbits. This could sound absurd, but it doesn't, because as Adam understands, courage is even more thrilling when you aren't half immortal, when you don't have ichor in your veins, when you're a prey animal who has 1,000 enemies trying to eat you. True epic, Adam shows us, isn't what gods do, but what underdogs do, in a world where there are no gods to help them. It is a thrilling subversion, and from it, Adams creates one of the best superheroes of all time, the dowdy bigwig. Bigwig has no God-made weapons, no supernatural protection, no divine heritage, only his own bluff and stubborn heart. Reckless and hard-headed, he faces down cats and wins. He survives a snare that would have killed anyone else. In another world with different companions, he would have become a bully. Instead, he becomes one of the most inspiring and endearing characters in the book. The climactic scene where he stands alone against the tyrant Roundwort, knowing he is overmatched, but not yielding an inch, gives me chills every time I read it. The most delightful part of the book is that Bigwig, though, isn't the novel's hero. Hazel is not heroic. He begins the novel as a gangly outcast with little physical strength and ends it disabled. His notable traits are his gentleness and his quiet conviction in doing what's right, and his willingness to listen to things other people would dismiss, including his strange mystic friend Fiver. Yet still others trust him and choose him to lead. He isn't the best fighter, that's Bigwig, or the fastest, that's Dandelion. He's not the best storyteller, that's Dandelion, or the cleverest, that's Blackberry. He's not the farthest seeing, that's Fiver, or the most authoritative, that's Holly. But he has tremendous gifts. First and foremost, his humility. Like Socrates, he knows what he doesn't know. When Blackberry figures out how to float the rabbits across the river, Hazel scarcely understands what's happening, but he understands that Blackberry understands and gives the order to go forward. He is emotionally intelligent, handling both the difficult Bigwig and the traumatized Strawberry. He has integrity when he makes mistakes. He apologizes for them. And if the sign of a civilization's strength is how it cares for its most vulnerable members, Hazel is exemplary there too, always supporting the timid Pipkin. As a child who grew up on Greek myths, Bigwig was wonderful, but Hazel changed my understanding of what a hero could be. A hero's strength is their love and kindness and careful attention. Seeing the rabbits defeat Roundwort under Hazel's leadership is one of the most pleasurable and satisfying endings to a story I have ever read. Pleasurable and satisfying, those two words sum up the whole book. Okay, I'm not going to keep reading, but that's exactly what I've been saying about this book. Yes, it's about rabbits, and you have to buy into that in the first 2 chapters. But then you understand, it teaches you, I have to tell you that, like she says in this essay, Hazel is probably the best example of leadership that you can see. Because Hazel has no special abilities, but he can find everybody's abilities and help them develop it. And that's absolutely amazing. And it's action-packed, it's exciting. I used to read this book to my kids before bedtime. I'd read them a chapter, and sometimes they would get upset when I would stop because they wanted me to keep going. So it's, what can I tell you? I think there's tremendous Musa Haskell in this book. You know, it starts off like she says about the Warren, where this Fiver gets like an image that is going to be destroyed, and the Warren, and they run away, you know, and sure enough, the Warren gets destroyed, and a couple of survivors come back. And I may be projecting here, but I can't help but compare it to, you know, to European Jewry was destroyed, and the few survivors who went to find, you know, a new place in either America or Israel to be able to rebuild and to start over. But what can I tell you? When a book about rabbits has the ability to make such an impression and on people, I think it's a tremendous thing. So that's my go-to. That's the first one. I'll mention 2 more without giving it the same treatment that I gave Worship Down. I just happened to have read this essay. That's why it was on my head. And I said, wow, that's exactly what I've been... Every now and then you see something that's exactly what you've been saying all along, and it's just amazing. I've been doing a critique of Mormonism for many, many years. And it turns out that there was a Broadway show that came out called Book of the Mormon. And I put in a new I put in a new radio in my car, and it came with with Spotify for a year. I was able to get Spotify. So I went to, the Broadway channel, because I haven't listened in a long time. All of my musical knowledge is, from musicals are old. So there was this thing called the Book of the Mormon, and this guy sings this song, I Believe. It's much everything I've ever said all these years, and there it is, all spoken out in amazing detail. So there's something, when you find someone expressing exactly what you're trying to say, Someone told me that they gave Shia Cohen My Platonic Relationship cassette. This was a share I gave some 35 years ago, and they didn't say viral back then. They said, it went platinum. When a record sells a lot, it goes platinum. It was my first tape to ever go platinum. And someone played it for Shia Cohen, and he said, I've been saying these things for years. He just says it better. So that to me is, when you can say what everyone is saying, but you could just say it clearly. Anyway, that's why I saw this. But I'll mention two other novels that I think are of tremendous value. One is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, a very important book, a very large book. It fits the definition of a classic. I don't know who said this. I really should Google it, but I heard it many years ago. The definition of a classic is a book that takes 500 pages to tell a 300-page story, and Les Miserables takes 1,000 pages, I think, give or take. Because every now and then he goes off on an 80-page tangent. So one of the characters in the book, his father was in the Battle of Waterloo, so he spends 80 pages talking about the Battle of Waterloo. At one point he escapes into a nunnery, and he spends 80 pages talking about nunneries. At one point, Jean Valjean escapes into the Paris sewer system, and he spends 80 pages talking about the Paris sewer system. So between me and you can skip those parts of the book, and it's still, but the story of tshuva and of redemption that is in that book is just so powerful, such a tremendous mashal for the power of tshuva that it's just inspiring. I find it inspiring, and it's a mashal. Never happened. It's all make believe, but when it shows you the goodness of people and the capability of what people could achieve, it's I find that inspiring. And another book. Now I should point this out. All right, I guess by way of introduction, although it's a little late for introduction since we only have 5 minutes left. But by way of introduction, I never really went to university. Yeah, I went to Queens College, night college, to try to make my parents happy. I took 2 courses, Introduction to Psychology and Introduction to Sociology. I remember this was in the 70s, and my dad was like, so did you sign up for college? And I said, yeah. So what'd you take? I said, Psychology 101 and Sociology 101. The Psych and Soc? Every hippie moron takes Psych and Soc. Why didn't you take a math class? So I realized at that point that I wasn't going to make them happy anyway. So I didn't go back to college. When I moved to Los Angeles to learn and work in LA, which my parents referred to as running away from home. So once my parents saw that I was able to succeed on my own, they made another push for me to go to college, and I went to Valley Night College. And here I took 2 courses that I wanted. I took journalism and broadcasting. And after that I said, anyone who can do this for 4 years, I have tremendous respect for you. I mean, if you want to become a doctor or, a geneticist or something like that, I understand. But if you want to get like, feminist dance theory or like, these hokey kind of, degrees, it seems to me like a waste of time. So I just couldn't see doing it for that long. But I do, use my bathroom time as well as I can, and I read classical novels. So I've gone through a lot of Dickens. In fact, I was speaking once in a very academic high school, and I quoted from Bleak House. Now, to show you how academic this is, they have a head of the English department. I don't mean general studies. When I went to school, we had a Hebrew principal and a general studies principal. I mean, there's one person in charge of the English department, one person in charge of the science department, one person in charge of math, and all of the different, classes, very large school. Anyway, in the course of my speech, apparently I had quoted from Bleak House by Dickens. And she came up to me at the end and she said, "You read Bleak House?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I can't get through Bleak House." "Yeah, how did you do it?" I said, 2 pages at a time in the bathroom. There was one time I was talking about this and I brought one of these books to quote, and a woman told me, she says, another woman said to me, "He's telling the truth. Look, he uses a piece of toilet paper as the bookmark." That's true, I do. But, I read a lot of Dickens. So if I have to recommend, if you're going to read one Dickens novel, remember they're all very long. He's verbose because he got paid by the word. I would suggest David Copperfield. And I've read a lot of Dickens, but David Copperfield is somewhat autobiographical. And, what's nice about it is that none of these characters are perfect by any stretch of the imagination, I mean, I could argue that Little Dorrit maybe has also a tremendous amount of mussar, but it's not as easy to read. But David Copperfield is, of course, by many considered the classic Dickens, and definitely a worthwhile thing to read and to put into perspective. Maybe I would mention just one more, and that's Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Also, a psychological thriller about crime and punishment, and about consequences of actions and how they go on, and also very, very powerful, and how it goes on. I'll give one more, and that is by Hardy. Hardy is very difficult to read, not because he doesn't write well, he writes wonderfully, but because he is very negative. And as he goes on, the books become more and more negative to the point when there was such outrage that he just stopped writing novels and switched to just doing poetry because it was just too harsh, the stories. But The Mayor of Casterbridge is such a story of how people can be so self-destructive in their life and just destroy their lives. Every time success comes, they do something that just destroys it. So those are some of my recommendations. Okay, well, that's it for this episode. I hope some of this was worthwhile to you. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can leave a comment. You can sponsor an episode, please. We're almost out of sponsors. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can sponsor a Parsha in 5. You can ask a question. There's a little button there for that. And that's it. And until next time, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. The Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again, it's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.